Hello and welcome to the Voice of Liberty podcast. My name is Henry Conley. Tonight we're going to talk about the protests that are going on today because I really feel like they do need to be talked about. And tonight was going to be an episode discussing Candace Owens and the interview she gave a couple days ago, but I decided that I'm not even going to worry about that right now because what we saw today across this country, honestly, is beautiful. It's honestly the best protest I have seen to fight police brutality and to reform the system that we live under and that kills unarmed minorities. States all over the place, iconic scenes across this country were filled with thousands of people standing up and fighting and making their voices heard. In Philadelphia, they went from the art museum down the parkway and back to the art museum. They're still going right now, holding lines against the police after curfew. In California, they were on the Golden Gate Bridge. In Los Angeles, they marched through the streets. Everywhere they took to the streets and they reminded everyone that those are their streets too. They shut things down in order to make change and make their voices heard. They're doing it in a stark contrast to how everything went last week. And it's beautiful. It's great. I love it. I'm excited to watch these continue tomorrow. But right now, I guess it needs to be said, we are also witnessing the National Guard moving troops into these cities. The police are putting up their lines because there are cities like New York and Philadelphia who are still under curfew. And tonight, those protesters could be brutally assaulted by the police. And I'm scared for that. So to the protesters, I say, please be safe and protect yourself. Don't let them shoot you. I'd hate to have to harp on the police brutality during these protests against peaceful protesters, but I'm going to for a brief moment here from a couple different angles. I want to make a statement here about these curfews. I argued that there shouldn't be curfews, and I'm going to continue that argument. These curfews are a direct infringement on their First Amendment rights. These curfews are nothing more than a way to silence the protests. Because I'm sure that these protesters would keep this thing going 24/7 until justice happened and until radical change of the police system and the system the criminal justice system as a whole occurred. But another thing I want to reiterate from what I said a couple days ago is that the police and their brutality, they're making it more apparent. I'm really trying to figure out what they think they're going to accomplish by shooting homeless people sitting in a wheelchair with rubber bullets. What they're going to accomplish shooting BB bags at protesters' skulls and cracking and fracturing their skulls. What they're going to accomplish by pushing over an old man, watching him fall to the ground and bleed from his head and his ear. How is this going to stop this conversation on police brutality? It's only going to fire it up more. This brutality needs to end. And so this leads me to what I'm actually trying to get to here, which is, are we witnessing history in the making? Are we witnessing something huge? The second civil rights movement. Because it's been idle talk from, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, you got Tamir Rice, you got all of the Breonna Taylor, you got all these people who their deaths sparked Black Lives Matter movements and protests, and nothing happened. But here we are, 50 states and 40 countries. That's currently how many states and countries are a part of the international George Floyd protest. All 50 states, people of all walks of life and all colors, are coming together to demand radical change. Today, what you saw was calls to defund the police, to call to question how we have policed the streets of America and whether it's time to change that and re-examine how we do this. I argue that we are currently witnessing, involved in, and fighting and promoting the next civil rights movement. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the textbooks will read that this was what sparked radical change and fixed liberty in America to an extent. Because coming out of this, I doubt that we are going to have a movement to defund the police actually work. But what I do think will come out of this is that police tactics, police training, the weapons they have and the weapons they're able to deploy, that will be fully re-examined. And it won't be the federal government doing it. It probably won't be state governments doing it. It will be localities changing these tactics, this training. Minorities will be able to, hopefully, coming out of this, breathe a sigh of relief when they see a police officer, instead of worrying whether they're going to die. This movement is going to change things. I was watching one of the news channels earlier today, and they were talking to a protester. And they asked her, what do you think is so different about this time versus any of the other police-involved shootings, associates of police, or vigilante shootings? And she said that this time she thinks that more people were listening and more people were watching. And I would agree. George Floyd, his life mattered. His memory matters also. And his memory is going to serve as the catalyst to protect minorities in this country from the police. These protests aren't ending soon, and that's fine. I love it. Today in Philadelphia, like I said, they shut down the art museum, or shut down from the art museum, working down the Parkway city streets. Anybody that hasn't been to Philadelphia, the art museum and City Hall, which is where they ended up, is a good distance from each other. They literally, by the thousands, shut these streets down and showed people that this conversation's not done. It's not over. The protests today were really beautiful too, in another way, because there was a little bit of a jubilant nature to them. There's already some changes occurring. Last week, even peaceful protests during the day were being disrupted by police violence. Police were inciting the violence. They were tear gassing and shooting at unarmed, peaceful protesters. Yet here we are 12 days later, And for the most part, these peaceful protests that happened in these major cities, the police reaction was very different. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the people are starting to see that they have the power. I just watched video out of New York where there was a line of cops getting ready to control where the protesters were going. The protesters didn't back down, though. They stood peacefully. And they forced the police to move, to recalculate their decision, and to change their tactic. The police left. And the police moved. The protesters won. There was no violence, but they, through calculated measures, made the police have to question what technique they were going to use. Because now the spotlight's on you. These cops are starting to see, as more and more of their brothers and sisters injure and hurt unarmed, peaceful protesters, that the internet is reacting and that the internet is putting it out there. The cops that pushed over that old man in Buffalo, New York, they're a perfect example of it. They pushed him over. The police department tried saying that he tripped. The video went out. The internet buzzed with it. And now they were arraigned. Yes, they're out on their own recognizance with no bail because they're cops, and in the end, probably nothing's going to happen. But the message that went out to other police officers via that was, the internet's watching us, and they will put us out there. They'll find out who we are, and they'll make sure that our police departments have to react. And the concern there for them is that if the bills like the ones that Justin Amash is trying to push through in Congress, if those bills go through, suddenly these cops are in a situation they've never been in, where they can actually be held accountable and where they can actually be sued. These peaceful protests today were joyous because people are seeing some results. No matter how small they are still small. There are still results, and there are still positive results, and more results than they've ever gotten. This is history. It's writing itself right now. We're living it. And the question to those who are not supporting the protests, the question to those who are saying the protests shouldn't be happening, the question to everyone that's not out there trying to fight this battle is this. And I must preface this: if you are afraid of coronavirus, then I understand. That's a valid reason. But my SJW side is going to come out for a second here. If you are not out there because you think that these protests shouldn't be happening, if you think that what Candace Owens or Donald Trump retweeting her said about George Floyd, if you are on any side of the history or any side of the page that is not this needs major reform right now, then I have to ask you a question. What side of history will you be on? The right side or the white side? And now everybody can go off. Call me an SJW. Yes, I just went there. Because it's an honest question. We're seeing this change. We're making history. And people are starting to be held accountable for what they say about these things. Drew Brees, and just to go off on a side tangent here, Drew Brees decided to make some inconsiderate statements about Colin Kaepernick and his kneeling during the Magical Sky song, or Sky Flag song. Drew Brees, in doing so, as the quarterback for New Orleans, is being publicly roasted on Twitter to the point where he's had to issue 3 apology statements. And then also say that, wow, I was wrong. I thought it was about the flag, but it's not, because, everything's about the magical sky cloth to people. The commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, had to go back and walk back his statements on the protests. Peaceful protesting was challenged. Peaceful protesting got people all in a tizzy because kneeling during the Magical Skycloth song is bad. Well, that was quiet, peaceful protesting. We now have loud, peaceful protesting going on. It's loud now, and it's crazier now because change is occurring. It's loud now because people ignored them. So, be a part of history. Go out there. Hold signs. Stand in solidarity with people. Demand justice. Demand change. Demand that police no longer kneel on the neck of an unarmed, innocent man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Demand that police no longer serve no-knock warrants and shoot an innocent woman. Demand that police no longer kill Black disabled men. Demand that police no longer have the ability to kill a little tiny kid. Demand that police no longer have the ability to walk free. Be a part of this. Especially to us libertarians. We've talked about criminal justice reform and police reform for years. We've been talking this talk. It's time for us to walk this walk. The time is now. Be on the right side of history. And let's lead a charge that protects people who have been not protected under the law for so long. Anyway, guys, the Voice of Liberty podcast. My name is Henry Conley. Awaken the voice of liberty.